When you were pitched to be on the documentary, how was it pitched to you that we're looking at Vince McMahon's life and everything he's accomplished in wrestling? Was that
I
the
was never asked to be a part of the documentary. The footage that you saw of me and my comments were all from a completely different set of interviews I did for a completely different project.
oh,
It's just that those interviews happened to fit
okay.
into the narrative that was being presented in this documentary. So
Uh,
they repurposed footage that was never intended to be a part initially, because I wouldn't have agreed. I wouldn't have wanted to have been a part. I'm not a big fan of these types of exposés, and unless it's something relatively positive, it's just not my thing. I don't like to
yeah,
be a
no,
participant in mudslinging. I just don't.
no. And it felt like it fell into two camps. It was either lots of talking heads that were either saying how fantastic Vince was, or the mudslinging camp. And as you often find in those kind of talking head documentaries, that's what you got. It's really interesting to see the kind of types of people they brought in.
But I think, Ben, one of the things that makes, I did an interview when I worked for Vince directly. I reported directly to Vince back in 2019. And shortly after I got to WWE and took the position, I did an interview with a writer. I think he was a newspaper writer on the East Coast, and said, hey, it was a very short interview. It was like, hey, how would you describe Vince McMahon? And I said then the same thing I'll say now. He is, without question, one of the more complex human beings I've ever been within geographical proximity to. He is incredibly complex because there's some good things about Vince. He's done some really good things for people that people don't know about. He's never wanted publicity for it. He's never wanted to be acknowledged. In fact, he goes to an extreme to make sure that if he does something positive for someone, everybody knows you're not supposed to talk about it. But he does have a heart, even though he's presented as someone who doesn't. He does. I think part of Vince McMahon, I'm not a psychiatrist. I have no training or anything other than just having been around the block for 70 years. And I like to observe people and patterns. I think part of the reason Vince likes to project this aura of invincibility and he's almost impenetrable in terms of getting to know who he is. That's, in my opinion, a defense mechanism. I think there's a very broken human being somewhere deep down inside all of the bravado and all of the aggressiveness. There is a man with a heart. Unfortunately, there's also the other side that I think is partly as a result of some of the trauma that Vince went through early in life. And it's easy to dismiss that as an excuse. But when you're 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 years old and you're being beaten by your stepfather and sexually abused, that scar tissue doesn't go away on its own. That takes some real professional help and commitment and a long time to overcome and not allow those things and that damage to affect you the rest of your life. And I think that is a part of the reason why the control, if you look at some of the allegations, and they're just allegations at this point, we haven't heard the other side of the coin. It's really easy to jump on allegations, especially ones that were that graphic and hard to even read. Even for someone who has a thick skin like I do, it was tough to read. But it's still one side of the coin, and there's a lot of money involved. We're talking about generational wealth for this young woman and her attorneys and her PR firm. There's a lot of people that are turning her case into a business to maximize the opportunity. And when all you do is listen to that side, as despicable as some of the scenarios we read about were, and some of the text messages that were made public and all that, there's still two sides of that coin.
Yep.
And it still comes down to, was it consensual or not? And we haven't heard the other side yet. And I refuse to allow the media to manipulate my emotions because it happens too often. Most media is not designed to inform you. It's designed to make you feel and become emotional, because that's easy. Making people feel is easy. Making people think is much more difficult and not nearly as entertaining.
Yeah.
So the tendency for media is to always go towards the dirt and creating a narrative that's designed to create fear, disgust, joy, whatever it is. It's not necessarily designed to inform. And I recognize that in all forms of media. And as a result, I discipline myself to not buy anybody's line of thinking until I hear both sides of a story or investigate something on my own, research it on my own to determine how I think about it, not how I feel about it.